Today we will study the learning outcome 2 of financial and management control. So this is related to preparing budgets for organization and analyzing costs, analyze causes of costs and sales variance. So under this we will cover the sensitivity analysis and flexible budgets, then application of budgetary techniques and use of incremental budgeting, activity-based budgeting, and zero-based budgeting. So these are the different budgeting techniques. So we will cover that. Then we will cover cost and sales variance and propose improvement plans to address the issues that may arise due to variance or the causes of variance. And finally, we will consider an example and the application of reconciling actual contribution of profit to budgeted contribution or profit. So the first one we take up is sensitivity analysis and flexible budgets. So under this, first we need to understand the basic concept of budgeting. So budgeting is a part of management accounting, and it impacts the areas of planning, control, and performance management. Basically, a budget is a quantitative plan prepared for a specific time period, and it is expressed in terms of monetary units. So a budget can be either for 6 months or 1 year, but it is generally not for long term, up to 1 year, and in that it can be divided into like monthly, quarterly, and so on and so forth. So it contributes to performance management by providing benchmark against which to compare actual results and develop corrective measures. So there is a historical basis for preparing budgets. So the historical data is taken into consideration and the budget is prepared. So for example, if the administrative expenses for the last year was say 20,000 pounds, but and there has been no significant changes in the administrative setup, and the organization expects the same, almost the same cost to be incurred this year, they will apply a certain amount of I say inflation or an increase, and then they will budget for the administrative expenses. So for the different categories of expenses, a suitable logic or a justification is provided and a budget is prepared, which can be justified to the senior level management and approval can be obtained. So the financial budgeting process, it consists of various steps, which is important for the different types of budget that is prepared by the organization. So the budgeting, it can be used either for sales targets, staffing plans, production, capital expenditure, or other discretionary expenses by the organization. So the financial budgeting process, it involves stakeholder input, which means that the inputs from the different departments, the managers, is taken into account before the budget is prepared. So the departmental manager, if he feels that the cost of raw materials has risen significantly, the price of commodity or any other raw materials have increased significantly, so he will apply the inflation rate and on the basis of that he will provide his inputs for the budget that is being prepared. Then the budget relates to the vision, mission, and goal setting. So the main objective of any budget is to ensure that adequate funds are available for all the growth opportunity, while also reducing expenses where on unnecessary or redundant activities. So that way, the budget is basically derived from the organizational strategy of improving the financial performance and leading to higher profitability. Then there is a step of needs assessment, which relates to the needs of the different departments, the different functions of an organization. So for example, if the marketing department needs more budget because they have given a justification that they can go for celebrity endorsement. So that can lead to higher sales or higher visibility of the product or service. Then that is taken into account, and the budget is prepared for the marketing and sales department. Then the direction to staff is given, and the operating budget impact. So what is the impact of operating budgets, that is also studied. And then the budget is adopted. So this involves basically approval from the senior level management for the budget, and then the allocation is done by the senior level to the different departments. And then the results are monitored. For example, if the expenses are lesser than expected, so this is also highlighted in the review meetings, and the budgets are adjusted as and when required. But there is not like too much scope for increase in budget. For example, if the marketing department has requested 10,000 pounds, but suddenly after 3 months they're asking for 80,000 pounds, so that will not be feasible. So within a limit, the budget variance is studied, and the adjustments are made. So the budgeting exercise, it serves many purpose for the organization. The first among them is planning. So a budgeting process forces a business to look into the future. So it helps the managers to visualize the expenses that will be incurred over the next 1 year or next 6 months, like that. So control. So the control is maintained by comparing the actual actual expenses against the budget that is prepared. So accordingly, actions are taken. So it's like I said, if some department feels that there is a sudden increase in raw materials or some other increase, so that is highlighted, and then accordingly decisions are taken by the senior management. So budget also serves as a communication between the senior level, the junior level, and the mid-level management. So the inputs are taken from employees across different hierarchy, and then the budget is prepared. So this also leads to coordination among all parts of the business, not only the top-down or bottom-up coordination, but also the horizontal coordination, which means coordination across different departments, is also carried out when preparing the budget. So then the evaluation. So this consists of evaluation of the accuracy of the projections by the manager who has prepared the budget, and over the aspects of revenues and costs over which they have control. So basically, if the manager is falling short by targets, then he needs to take extra measures to catch up with the revenues that has been lost and to make up for the yearly target. Similarly, in terms of costs, so if he has the leeway to spend more, then he can do so if he can see that more revenue can be generated for the organization. So motivation. So many managers, they feel that they have not achieved the true potential because the budget was limited. But when they get the budget, they feel motivated, and then they can chase growth for the organization. So again, authorization. So it acts as a formal method of authorization. So like in organizations, what happens is that the budget is decided beforehand, and when it is authorized at the higher level, the next level of authority is with the managers. So then they can pursue the growth plans by through different activities such as hiring or marketing or sales. So and then delegation. So delegation means the extra responsibility may motivate the managers. They when a budget is allocated to them, they want to spend it judicially, so that they can show their potential to their senior colleagues, and they can get more business for the organization. There are three types of budget basically, but the classification can be like many types of classification, but these are the three broad classifications of budget. So the first one is operating budget. So in this, the revenues and associated expenses in day-to-day operations are budgeted in detail and are divided into major categories. So it can be administrative expenses, marketing expenses, salary expenses, non-salary expenses. So these are the different categories that come under the operating budget. Then capital budget. So capital budget are requests for purchases of large assets uh, that create demands for organizations' cash flow. So basically, the capital expenditure such as investment in say machinery, plant, or a new infrastructure. So these decisions are taken under the capital budget. Then there is a thing called cash budget. So the cash budget, it combines both the operating budget and capital budget, and it does a comparison of the cash flow both for revenues as well as expenditure. So accordingly, the whole organizational budget is prepared, and it by deciding whether the organization would require to raise more financing for its uh, like working capital and the capital expenditure and other its general requirements. So the cash budget, it gives the overall figure. So like now we have till now we have discussed what is a budget and what are different types of budget. But as we know that the projections, they do not work 100% in the real business environment. So there are situations where the actual scenario may demand higher budget allocation, but the organization is constrained that okay, only this much budget is allocated. So there is a practice of called flexible budget in which these variations can be taken into account. So a flexible budget is used as a static budget and basically changes with the changes happening in the volume or activity held in production, or manages efficiency and effectiveness because it is set to benchmark for actual performance of the company. So suppose if the budget for production has been set for say 10,000 units, but if there is a higher demand for the product, so the budget can be changed through the flexible budget. So that way, flexible budget, the managers are forced to consider the different scenarios and the response to them. So it is not like once you have prepared the budget, you sit on it the whole year and then you will see next year. No, there's a dynamic response to the budget, to the flexible budget. Then these budgets are different in level of activity, which facilitates the ascertainment of fixation of costs, selling prices, and tendering of quotations. So basically, like what is the cost structure or selling prices, because the prices have to be made dynamic in response to the competition in the market. So these things are considered when preparing a flexible budget. So now we move to sensitivity analysis. So what is sensitivity analysis? So it is basically a financial modeling technique to analyze how the different values of independent variables impact a specific dependent variable. So if you consider an example of calculating an NPV for a project. So if we change the discount rate, the NPV will be different. If we change the cash flow projections, the NPV will be different. So basically, your NPV is a dependent variable. Your discount rate and the cash flows and other assumptions, they are independent variables. So it helps in investigating how projected performance will vary along with changes in the key assumptions. So it helps you to like create various scenarios. So in like a real world financial modeling, organizations, they generally prepare 4 or 5 cases by using sensitivity analysis. So first is the base case scenario, then the revenue projections will be like plus 10%, plus 20%, plus 30%, then minus 10%, minus 20%, minus 30%. So this is obviously based on demand and other factors which are used to prepare the model. So, here we will discuss the steps that are used to prepare the used to carry out the sensitivity analysis for arriving at NPV. In the first step, you need to identify the variable which have an influence on the project's NPV or IRR. So like I give you two examples. One is the cash flow projection, the other is the discount rate. So other factors could be like the inflation. So these factors, they have influence on the project's NPV. Then you define the underlying quantitative relationship among the variables. So you include the formula for NPV and how and the different components that are comprised in the formula. So the current value of the cash flow divided by the discount rate, like whatever it is, and then you analyze the impact of the changes in each of the variables on NPV of the project. If you change the weighted average cost of capital from 10% to 8%, how it's going to impact the NPV. If it increases, how it's going to impact the NPV. So these are the different scenarios that are calculated. So next, we look into the advantages and limitations of sensitivity analysis. So the main benefit of sensitivity analysis is that it gives greater visibility to the weak spots in an investment. So what does it mean? So if your cost of equity and debt financing is increasing, you can visualize what will be your actual rate of return rather than sticking with the one assumption of the weighted average cost of capital. So it helps you to stimulate the different values for weighted average cost of capital for arriving at the NPV. Then it helps the managements to more critically investigate such factors and validate the assumption. So if your weighted average cost of capital is coming at say 7%, but the management is not convinced that it can be so low. So again, they can calculate the values for 10%, 12%. So that way they will see what is the sensitivity of the weighted average cost of capital to the overall returns of the project. So based on these, the managers can make informed decisions. Now, in terms of limitations, the variables are often interdependent, which makes examining each of them individually unrealistic. So, like I said in the example of calculating the weighted average cost of capital and the inflation. So, if the inflation increases, that means it can also impact the cost of equity, the expected returns of the shareholders. So that is one important thing that you need to consider. But you cannot isolate each and every variable and then study their impact on the dependent variable. So that is one limitation of sensitivity analysis. Then analysis is basically dependent on past data or experience which may not hold in the future. So if you have taken a debt financing at 12%, but that is again is a historic data, so that may not be applicable in the future. So that sensitivity analysis, it is neither a risk measuring nor a risk reducing technique. So it is just a plain simple calculation which gives you an idea. So neither the risk is reduced nor the risk is managed by using this. So next we move into the budgetary techniques and use of incremental budgeting, activity-based budgeting, and zero-based budgeting. So incremental budgeting. So what does it mean by incremental budget? So it starts with the previous period's budget or actual results and adds or subtracts the incremental amount to cover inflation and other known changes. So it means that if the administrative expenses are say like 10,000 pounds, you can add like, okay, if the inflation is there for 3%, so you can include the inflation rate and then you can budget it. straightforward, that simple. So it is generally suitable for stable businesses where costs are not expected to change significantly. So more likely the stable and mature businesses, not like a technology startup where the revenues can fluctuate significantly. That the approach for incremental budgeting, it starts with the assumption that the expenditures incurred in the previous year will be the starting point. So again, it takes into account the historical data, which again is a drawback for using incremental budgeting. In terms of the advantages, incremental budgeting is the quickest and easiest method. So simply you apply a positive percentage or negative percentage, and then you calculate the budget for this year based on the last year's budget. Or even a better way you can do is use the average of the last 5 years, and then you prepare the budget for the next year. So again, it is suitable only if the organization has stable cash flows or revenues, and then they need to justify the increment. So this is generally used as a technique by companies to help eliminate the rivalry or build a value of equality among departments. So it is not like marketing department will get a 20% hike in budget, whereas the accounting and finance department will get 3% hike in budget. So basically, a standard increment is applied so that no department feels that they have been discriminated against. So in terms of limitations, so if the previous budget had certain inefficiencies, the same is being carried over for the next year's budget. So, for example, the uneconomic activities which could have been identified and removed, that exercise is not done in the case of incremental budgeting. It is simply ignored. And then managers may spend unnecessarily to use up their budgeted expenditure. So like if a marketing department has got a 10% increase in budget, so they have to utilize last year's budget plus a 10% increase. So they will just have to show that they have utilized rather than saving. So this is the limitation in the incremental budgeting. So the next is activity-based budgeting. So in activity-based budgeting, the organization first identifies, analyzes, and researches the activities that determine the cost of the company, and then prepares the budget based on these results. So activity-based budgeting, it allows for high degree of refinement in cost planning. So this is basically a transformed way of doing the budgeting. So the budgets are prepared after the justification has been received by the respective department that this cost will be incurred in the future. So the budget is allocated to them. So basically it is activity oriented and not function oriented. So function oriented means department wise a certain budget is allocated. So the advantages of activity based budgeting is that it draws attention to the cost of overhead activities, which can be a large proportion of the total operating cost. So which means that helps to scrutinize the areas of inefficiency and remove them from the budget. Then the activity-based budgeting, it acknowledges the importance of activities which drive costs. So accordingly, the cost efficiency measures can be introduced in the organization. So it also provides useful information in a total quality management environment by relating the cost of an activity to the level of service provided. So basically, it relates the accountability and the responsibility and the performance of that department or a product or a service with the budget. But again, preparing activity-based budgeting can often be quite challenging due to the amount of amount of time and resources required. So and it is more focused towards short-term goals rather than focusing towards the long-term, like 5 years, 10 years goals of the organization. The next is zero-based budgeting. So this budgeting technique is is the process of creating a budget from nothing. So basically, you identify all the cost heads. Again, the exercise is done from the scratch. So it requires each cost element to be specifically justified. Again, it's similar to activity-based budgeting, but totally different from incremental budgeting. So it is suitable for allocating resources in areas where spend is discretionary. For example, uh, research and development, advertising and training. So it just does not allow the percentage over the previous years, but it sees like how much research and development will require actually, and how much advertising will require actually. So based on that, budgeting is done. So again, the main benefit of zero-based budgeting is that inefficient or obsolete operations can be identified and discontinued. So if you feel that, okay, there will be no budget for advertising for this year, so it will not allocate anything. So for example, if the company does not want to advertise on television, so they will just simply strike off that option and allocate in other options in the marketing division. Then the zero-based budgeting, it leads to increased staff involvement at all levels, since a lot more information and work is required to complete the budget. So a detailed analysis is carried out regarding each of the cost heads. So therefore, the involvement of the staff is more, and knowledge and understanding of the cost behavior patterns of the organization is enhanced. So for every cost item, the organization has more knowledge and more understanding, and then they can also apply like cost efficiency measures using a zero-based budgeting. Again, like activity-based budgeting, the focus is on short-term as compared to the long-term goals of the organization. Then the budgeting process may also become very rigid, and it may not be able to react to unforeseen opportunities. So, for example, if you have allocated research and development a certain amount of budget, it will not be possible to give another substantial addition to the budget because the organization budget may already have been frozen. So it does not react to dynamic changes. And therefore, the managers may feel demotivated due to large amount of time spent on budgeting process because they will have to justify every cost head, which often becomes like it feels like they are being questioned for every organizational spending. Now we study the concept of cost and sales variance and how improvement plans can be for variance. So sales variance, it is nothing but it is just a difference between the actual sales and the projected sales. So why does this occur? The variance is generally due to the pricing and because an organization cannot go for a single pricing throughout the year. So it has to resort to dynamic pricing based on the response of the competitors. So due to this, selling price variance comes. So again, there is a variance for unit price for units sold. For example, if the company begins selling in a new region and expects to sell 100,000 units in the first year, but sells only 80,000 units. So there is a variance based on that projections. So the the sales variance can be caused either due to units variance or due to the selling price variance. So how can you address sales variance? So you can issue a time limited coupon offer that is effectively a price cut. So basically a small window of discount to the customer. So for example, if you book movie tickets on Book My Show, so you might be getting some offer on using Paytm that okay, you can avail this offer So that is one aspect of addressing sales variance. So then again, you can cut back on the number of product features and sell the product at a lower price point. So this can be the airlines sector can be an example, like they will not offer any meals or anything, but they will offer you cheap tickets. So that way the cost for them is reduced, and you also get an attractive offer for price for the tickets. And then you can reposition advertising to show a product as high end, which will allow for a price boost. Now, this may be applicable only in certain circumstances, but not for all products. So you cannot position Samsung phone as Apple iPhones. So there is a limitation to it, but you can position Dove soap in a higher segment where you can increase the prices when you're advertising and when you're making the consumers aware about the features of the product. Then there is a room for price increase. That again, a rigid forecast and budgets are not helpful. So as things change, you need to look into the factors through which you can generate higher revenues. So the pricing, the price analysis is one of the most important factors when you have to address the sales variance. Next, we go into the concept of setting standards. So, what do you mean by standard? So, a standard is a benchmark measurement of resource usage or revenue or profit generation set in a defined context. So, for example, you need a phone. So, there are certain defined standards, like it should have a front camera, it should have a back camera, it should be 20 megapixels, here touchscreen enabled. You should have a fingerprint access. So there are certain standards to it. So the customers are aware of the standard, and it is generally the organizations which set and define those standards so that they can differentiate themselves. So what are the basis for selecting or defining standards? So a prior period level of performance by the same organization. So like iPhone 7, 8, 9, 10. So they have a standard, and then they are improving upon that standard. Then a level of performance achieved by comparable organizations. So you can see the products of Unilever and Procter and Gamble and Nestle, they often compete in the same category. So that is a level of performance. They have to, any organization has to match up with the level of performance by the competitors. And then the level of performance required to meet organizational objectives. So this can be like a Pepsi telling that, okay, in this district you have to get this much sales, or in this zone you have to get this much sales. So that is the level of performance required to meet organizational objectives. So the standards can be either ideal standard, which is the highest level, the attainable standards, which the organization can try to achieve, or the current standard, which is the current status of the organization. So what are ideal standards? So ideal standards are generally set at ideal levels, which means there is no allowance for inefficiencies such as loss, waste, and machine downtime. That means if an organization has set up to the ideal standard, they have to achieve that. That is the highest possible standard. So it is achieved only under the most favorable conditions. Like for example, if India is playing a cricket match, so the ideal standard is that they win every match when they are batting second by 10 wickets. If they are batting first, that means when they are batting first, they should win. They should bowl out the opposition in like as little overs as possible. Or if they are batting second, they should lose as little over wickets as possible. However, this thing is in a real life cricket match, you can never predict what is going to happen. You can lose the first 5 wickets for 50 runs and then struggle to win the match, or you you can win the match in 35 overs when you don't lose any of the wickets. So therefore, it can be demotivating for individuals who feel that an adverse variance suggests that they have performed badly. So again, for cricket example, I can say if a person has been given out unfair, but he has no reviews left, so he will feel that okay, uh, it is very demotivating for him that he could not perform. Then we come to the concept of attainable standards. So these standards may are assume that efficient levels of operation can help the organization to achieve the goal, but which also includes allowances for factors such as losses, waste, and machine downtime. So attainable standard is generally what the organization set as their target. So it does not have negative motivational impact as it allows some provision for unavoidable efficiencies. So attainable standards. So you set a certain goal and then that is achievable. It's not like you'll get 100% year-on-year revenue growth. So 20% is a decent target which all the managers understand. So they go for that attainable standard. And then the current standard, which is the current performance levels. So if like public sector organizations, they just want to maintain the service levels at current standard. So it does not encourage any attempt to improve on current levels of efficiency because they know that they will not get bonuses if they perform higher, or they will not get a pay cut if they perform lower. So they just want to maintain the current levels of performance. So now we carry out an exercise of reconciliation of actual profit to budgeted profit. So what is a profit reconciliation statement? We'll look into that first. So it is used to sum up all the variances and then arrive at a consistent profit figure calculated by using different methods. So it helps the senior level management to explain the major reasons for difference between budgeted and actual profits. So some of the common reasons for variance could be differences between actual and expected product pricing, the unit sales, the changes in amount of overheads, or the changes in labor or material. So we go through an example. So if you read this, that a company produced 20,000 units and sales were 15,000 in 1 year. So if you assume fixed production costs, overheads for 100,000 pounds absorbed on a per unit basis. So fixed production is this. And then variable production costs per unit are labor, uh, 3 pounds, and materials 2 pounds. So that comes to 2 pounds. Then sales price per unit was 20, out of which a sales commission of 10 was payable. So that is a 2 pounds of commission was payable. So 5,000 additional sales costs were incurred. So what is the profit made using both absorptional and marginal costing? So here marginal costing value of inventory is 5 pounds, so it is 3.2. Then 5 plus 5 is the 10 pounds, which is the total absorption costing. So when you are calculating the profits, you should not forget the variable selling cost, which is the contribution, but that is not used for valuing the stocks. So you need to add the marginal production cost of sales, marginal sales cost, and then total marginal cost of sales. So how do we do that? So in absorption costing, you use sales 15,000 into 20, which is 300,000 pounds. Production cost is 10 into 20,000, that is 200,000, which is like if you use 20,000, but you sold only 15,000. Then the closing stock is 5,000 is your holding stock. So your total cost is 150,000. Your gross profit is 50%, which is 150,000. Less selling and administration and distribution cost, which comes to around 35,000. So your net profit is 115,000. Now using marginal costing, again you get a different profit figure. So if you see the contribution of the word contribution is key over this. So what is the difference in profits? So for every unit in inventory, a 5 pound worth of fixed overhead has been carried forward to be matched with revenue in the period. So difference is 25,000. So that is why the difference between the profit is complicated because of the calculation of the two costs. But example is a simple one. So non-production costs and over absorption, under absorption also needs to be considered. So if you are asked to calculate contribution, we don't need to produce a formal income statement. So the contribution term is very important when you are using in costing. So you can calculate the contribution per unit and then you can multiply by the number of units sold. And if you deduct the fixed cost, that will give us the net profit. So what is the advantages of using contribution? So it is easier for the management to understand, like I said in previous slide. You don't need to produce the entire income statement. Then it is consistent with your different costing techniques, your contribution method. The net profit is closer to net cash flow, and then it is consistent with standard cost and flexible budgeting. And profit is not affected by the changes in stock. So that is why you use alternative calculation of contribution, that is contribution per unit. So that is all for the time being.